I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons first. Thank you so much to my Biblios brand, Biblio Howlers, Bibliomancer, and my new Bibliomancer, Sophia. It means a lot to me that you are giving me your extra support toward my passion and hobby. Hi everyone, Petrik here. Today's video will be a book recommendation. Well, 10 books recommendation based on a series that you love. To be more precise, this is for a popular fantasy series that is beloved by everyone, including myself. So 2 months ago, I posted a video about if you like Mistborn, then try reading these books or reading this series. But for today's video, I'll be talking about the First Law series by Joe Abercrombie. So I will be giving recommendations 10 books of 10 series to read if you love the First Law world by Joe Abercrombie. I, as many of you know, consider the First Law world by Joe Abercrombie the best grimdark fantasy series that I have ever read to this date. In a grimdark fantasy series of novels. So for these recommendations, just like always, I'll be giving them based on category. You will understand this as we progress through the videos. For the first two, let's recommend this based on the beloved character from the First Law trilogy, and that is Sandan Glokta. The first book or the first series that I will recommend, of course, it will have to be A Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. It is only fair that I recommend this as the first one to recommend if you liked reading the First Law books by Joe Abercrombie. I mean, Joe Abercrombie considered this one of his main inspiration when it comes to writing and also when it comes to the First Law world. And speaking of Glokta, he is inspired by Tyrion Lannister from A Song of Ice and Fire. I don't think I need to say too much about Tyrion Lannister. He is one of the most popular fantasy characters now. Well, Glokta is as well, but not as popular as Tyrion Lannister. And I love the two. I love the two so much, but personally speaking, when it comes to the matter of writing characters, I actually like Joe Abercrombie's characterizations and character-driven narrative more than George R.R. Martin's. But that's just my opinion. I must say though, it is not only the characters, the tone, and almost everything about the First Law reminded me of reading A Song of Ice and Fire, except that I like the First Law world more than A Song of Ice and Fire. But again, that's just my opinion, but this is a good recommendation. If you like reading the First Law world, you definitely must try reading A Song of Ice and Fire by George R. Martin. Even though it is unfinished, probably will always remain unfinished. But speaking of Glokta, this is not the only recommendation that I will give. This is another one. This is Sons of Darkness by Gourav Mohanty. If the First Law world is written after being inspired by A Song of Ice and Fire, this one is written after being inspired by the First Law and also A Song of Ice and Fire. And there is a character here named Shakuni. He is a character from Mahabharata, and the way he is written in Sons of Darkness by Gourav Mohanty is incredibly similar to Sandan Glokta. I mean, he has the exact same beginning to Sandan Glokta. I mean, I consider this kind of like a homage, but I can understand why so many people, myself included, not gonna lie, I even mentioned this to Gourav Mohanty, felt that it's way too similar to Sandan Glokta for a while. The personality, the physical appearance, the hatred toward stairs, and all that. It is very similar to Sandan Glokta. However, when you check the real story behind Shakuni, it makes sense for Shakuni to behave that way in the narrative. It really makes sense. That's all I can say without giving spoilers. But I do think if you like reading the First Law, if you like reading A Song of Ice and Fire, I think Sons of Darkness by Gourav Mohanty will scratch that itch really nicely. I really love this book. I consider this one of the best fantasy debuts that I have ever read, and I'm still waiting for the sequel. The Dance of Shadows, if I'm not mistaken. So Gourav, if you're watching this, I'm waiting for the sequel. I hope you can get that out either this year or next year. I will be reading it for sure. But although Sandan Glokta is many people's favorite character in the First Law world, it is actually not mine. I mean, he is one of my top favorite characters, of course, but if I have to choose a favorite character, just one from the First Law world, it is Logan Ninefingers or the Bloody Nine. So for the next two recommendations, these are for those of you who are a fan of Logan Ninefingers or the Bloody Nine. The first one that I want to recommend, this is the Ash and Sand Trilogy by Richard Nell. Yeah, Ruka, son of Bela, one of the main characters in Ash and Sand Trilogy, is really one of the best characters in grimdark fantasy, in my opinion. And there are plenty of homage from this character to Logan Nine Fingers or the Bloody Nine in the first law. And you know, when it comes to the matter of competition and rivalry, I don't know who will win between the Bloody Nine or Ruka, son of Bela. Both of them have the tendency to go berserk, and I have no idea which one will win when they're pitted against each other. But you know what? Overall, Ash and Sand Trilogy is really one of the most criminally underrated grimdark fantasy trilogy. When the opportunity to give it a shout out appears, I will always give it a shout out because I just love Ash and Sand Trilogy that much, especially the second and the third book in the trilogy. I don't know what Richard Nell is writing right now, but whatever it is, especially if it is rooted in the same narrative or in the same writing style as the Ash and Sand Trilogy, I definitely will read it. And that's not the only recommendation. Here's another one, but this one is not a grimdark fantasy series. This is for Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. So there's a character here. When I read Shadow of the Gods for the first time, even though this is not a grimdark fantasy series, there's a character here named Orca. Orca is one of my favorite characters of all time as well. And when I first read this one, her determination to save her family and also her tendency to go berserk as well and pretty much just go absolutely ruthless toward her enemies reminded me a lot of Logan and also the Bloody Nine. And of course, that line of thought crossed my mind as well. Who will win between the Bloody Nine and also Orca? My bet is right now for the Bloody Nine, but again, this is just an imaginary situation. But also, I'm recommending this not only because of characters, but because of actions as well. When it comes to the matter of writing close-quarter combat scenes that doesn't involve a lot of magic, I always say that Joe Abercrombie and John Gwynne are the best in the genre. I love the way they write actions and battle sequence. So that's why I think The Shadow of the Gods, or even The Faithful and the Fallen, if you love the action scenes in the first law, I think there's a good chance you will like reading The Bloodsounder Saga or The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. So yeah, I'm recommending this if you like characters like Logan Nine Fingers again. So I just talk about action scenes. So let's recommend this based on actions because the first law, one of the most noticeable strengths of the series, as I said, it's absolutely incredible, immersive, and vivid action sequence. So for the next few recommendations, these are for those of you who want grimdark fantasy with that almost similar level of action scenes. So the next one, I'm going to recommend The Last War Trilogy by Mike Shackle. Just like the Ash and Sand Trilogy, this one is criminally underrated fantasy trilogy as well. I love this trilogy. The characterizations and also the actions, they are breathtaking. The entire story in the Last War Trilogy can be surmised to normal citizens trying their best to survive in a war situation. And of course, this will require them to do some very awful actions to survive and also to protect the people they love. It is an incredible trilogy. I like to recommend the Last War Trilogy if I could, all the time. And of course, this is an opportunity for me to do that. And the same thing can be mentioned for the next series that I'm going to recommend because I just don't see this series being mentioned by anyone at all in the booktube community. And it feels like I'm the only one who has read this book or this trilogy in the booktube circle. So yeah, this is Bloodsounder's Arc by Jeff Salyards. Just like the Last War Trilogy, Ash and Sand Trilogy, but even more, this is even more criminally underrated. Too few readers have read this trilogy. I think it is an amazing trilogy with close-quarter combat scenes almost as good as Joe Abercrombie. And the main character, one of the main characters, because this entire trilogy is told from the perspective of Alki. He is a scribe and he's following the tale of Brylar Kilcoin. And Brylar Kilcoin is someone that is so iconic, charismatic, and also reminiscent of iconic characters like Logan Nine Fingers or the Bloody Nine. His feats in the trilogy were incredible, and again, Jeff Salyards' action scenes, they were amazing to read. I know that I will do a second read of the Bloodsounder's Arc someday. I love this trilogy and I hope some of you will give it a try as well. But moving on to the next recommendation before we move on to the final category, this is for a non-grimdark fantasy series. Just like I said earlier, this is about recommending books based on actions that reminded me of reading Joe Abercrombie's way of writing battle scenes. And this book, this series, even though it is not grimdark fantasy, it reminded me of the first law the action scenes reminded me a lot of the first law. This is The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter, or the Burning series. It has been a few years since the second book, The Fires of Vengeance, came out. Hopefully the third book, The Lord of Demons, will come out soon. But yeah, the Burning series, if you like fast-paced and also well-written action scenes, this is the series for you. It is a revenge story that is reminiscent of the Red Rising saga by Pierce Brown, but put Joe Abercrombie's level of actions. I know that Joe Abercrombie and the First Law World is one of Evan Winter's main inspirations as well, especially the way he writes battle scenes, and I think it is reflected in Evan Winter's writing and battle sequence. And there are some parts here that actually reminded me of Dark Souls or Demon Souls. It is the way the main character, Tao, progressed his level of strength and development. And I think if you have played the From Software games and you have read this book, you will understand what I'm talking about. But speaking of From Software games, let's move on to the final category, and it is recommending based on the way the characters are written. Or to be more specific, the narrative of this next 4 series that I'm going to recommend, they are very character driven. Some are slower paced, some are faster paced. But the next one, because I was just talking about Dark Souls and also Demon Souls, this is a Dark Soul inspired fantasy novel. This is 11th Cycle by Kian, Ardalan, the first book in the Mistland series. The story is told from the perspective of 4 main characters, almost similar to The Blade itself by Joe Abercrombie. And yeah, as I said, this is a Dark Souls and also a Berserk inspired epic fantasy novel. Quite underrated because it has received a mixed reception from readers, but I personally loved it. I understand why people disliked it, and also I must say this is definitely grimdark to the core. If you like Berserk by Kentaro Miura, you will know what kind of stuff and darkness you are getting here. But if you are adverse to reading sexual assault, I strongly recommend you to read the trigger warning in 11th Cycle first. And if you want to read this book, I can definitely let you know which chapter to skip if you don't want to read the explicit scene. Overall though, I do think that this is an incredible grimdark fantasy novel, and I know that right now Kian Ardalan is doing a major editing on 11th Cycle to make it even better. So I'm waiting for the ultimate edition of 11th Cycle from the Broken Binding. But this is not the only recommendations. I still have 3 more recommendations. The next one is Pandemonium Rising by Mike Shackle. The first book is Solace Lost. Oh, sorry, I meant Mike Sliter. Similar names, okay? But yeah, Mike Sliter started writing Pandemonium Rising after he read The First Slow World by Joe Abercrombie. He felt so inspired by the way Joe Abercrombie writes characters, and so he decided to write Pandemonium Rising. And yeah, the way the characters are written, and also the pacing, and also the way everything is so centered toward the character actions and narrative, well, everything about it, it's very clear that Mike Sliter was inspired by The First Slow World. But same caveat as 11th Cycle, there is a detailed sexual assault scene in Pandemonium Rising as well, specifically only for the first book, Solace Lost. The author, Mike Sliter, is a psychiatrist, and unfortunately he has received some patients that faced this kind of very awful treatment in their lives, and he wants to reflect the insane and brutal ordeals in his book, in Solace Lost, and how sexual assault can affect the victim much longer after the events happen. It is very brutal. Yeah, so I can understand why readers don't want to read this kind of things in books, especially when it has already happened in a lot of grimdark fantasy novels. But if you do decide to read Pandemonium Rising, that sexual assault scene happened in the first book, and it did not happen again in the second or third book. Actually, the series actually became more hopeful after the first book somehow. I think it is intentional though, because it is not all grim and darkness. Mike Sliter wants to portray hope as well. And I still have 2 recommendations to give. The next one, I'm not sure whether this should be considered as grimdark fantasy or not, but it is certainly very character driven. It is Illborn by Daniel T. Jackson. Compared to the First Slow World, I think the pacing in Illborn is so much more faster paced. A lot of chapters in Illborn, they ended on a cliffhanger. So if you are not a fan of reading a narrative like that, you will have difficulties reading Illborn. But if you like reading chapters that ended constantly on a cliffhanger, making you want to jump into the next chapter as soon as possible, then this book is for you. And as I said, Illborn is told from the perspective of 4 main characters, and yeah, the narrative is very character driven, the writing is easy, and although one character here is absolutely despicable, I hate her so much, but I cannot deny the narrative is very compelling here. And finally, the last recommendation that I'm going to give, of course, it will be Dreams of the Dying. This is an example of character-driven narrative written effectively well. I love Dreams of the Dying so much, and I think the sequel will finally be out this year. The book, Dreams of the Dying, it is told from the perspective of 2 main characters. Most of them is told from the perspective of Jespar. The entire book can be advertised as Inception in a Polynesian fantasy world. I think that's the easiest way to actually recommend Dreams of the Dying in fewest words as possible. But if you want to know my full thoughts about Dreams of the Dying, I actually posted a full spoiler review of this book a long time ago when I started my YouTube channel. So that's about, I think 3 years ago. Yeah, that's about 3 years ago. I posted a full spoiler review of Dreams of the Dying, and right now I am waiting for the sequel, Cure for Living. Hopefully it will be out this year, but if it is, I will definitely read it immediately. I love this book very much. Easily one of the best self-published and also one of the best grimdark fantasy novels of all time. If it is, can be categorized as grimdark because as I always say, we cannot agree on what grimdark is. But yeah, that's my 10 recommendations for books or series to read if you love reading The First Floor World by Joe Abercrombie. I do have 2 honorable mentions though, but I haven't read these 2 books or these 2 series yet. I just talk about self-published fantasy books, and these 2 books, they are self-published fantasy books as well. And they are The Price of Power by Michael Michel and also The Trials of Ashbound by John F. Palladino. Now, I haven't read these 2 books yet. I will try to read them as soon as I can. I think I will be reading The Price of Power next month or in the month of July. It depends on my reading schedule, but yeah, within this year. But based on the words of everyone who have read these 2 books, both of them always mention, if you like reading the First Floor books, try reading The Trials of Ashbound or The Price of Power. So I, as a fan of the First Floor world, will definitely try reading these 2 books or these 2 series. But yeah, that's it. That's my recommendations for today. Do let me know what you think about the books that I recommended, and also have you read everything that I listed? If you have recommendations for books or series to read based on how much you love The First Floor World by Joe Abercrombie, do not hesitate to comment down below because I'm always on the lookout for them. But yeah, that's pretty much it from me today. As always, thank you so much for watching and thank you for your support. Bye bye. Lastly, I want to say thank you so much once again to all my patrons who keep on supporting me.